from the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast.
Taking stock of the nation's hogs and pigs, plus a look at processing expansion for pork. And agribusiness, checking on soybean charts.
So it's paying you to store beans right now, and we have not been accustomed to that.
Ken Ferry talks about the impacts of nitrogen loss when it's too wet and too dry, and impacting your world, one neighbor at a time.
AgDay, presented by the Chevy Silverado. High-strength steel for high-strength dependability.
Good morning, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Cheap feed and strong demand has the pork industry expanding. New numbers from USDA now tell us how much. The U.S. hog industry climbing 2% from a year ago, and it's 3% higher than June. Total herd size coming in at 73.5 million head. Now, breeding inventory is up slightly from last quarter and 1% higher than a year ago. It's slightly over 6 million head. And the market hog inventory reaching 67.5 million head. That's up 3% year over year. The June to August pig crop now registering 33 million head, up 2% as well.
Now we saw another new record in pigs per litter coming from the summer quarter this year, and that was 10.65 pigs per litter. The reason we mention that is because we're pushing up towards 11 pigs per litter and a productivity rate that's generally close to 1% a year, that we're able to increase the number of pigs just based upon that better productivity of the sow herd.
Pork plant expansion is occurring in the U.S. regardless of Thursday's numbers. Betsy Gibbon has an update.
Growth is happening rapidly on the pork processing side. 3 upgrades announced within the past 2 weeks. Total, there are now 5 new plants and 3 more in the process of renovating. AgDay toured one of those new facilities, Clemens Food Group pork processing operation, earlier this year in Coldwater, Michigan.
And we expect by February of 2018 to be at full capacity.
Clemens telling Farm Journal the operation plans to process 10,000 head a day by February. But it's meant to handle a double shift, meaning as many as 22,000 head could go through those doors every day, every year within the next 3 to 5 years. President of the National Pork Producers Council, Ken Mashoff, says while it's exciting to see this type of investment in the pork industry, the U.S. cannot just rely on domestic demand.
When I say cautiously optimistic, we know when the plants are built, the production operations are being constructed to fill those plants with animals. And so we know that U.S. consumption of pork has remained relatively steady in the high 50s, low 60s per pound per capita consumption per person for a long time. That's probably not going to change a lot. So this means we're going to have to export this product as it comes out of these plants. And so that ties into trade.
The 8 plants, which are new or modernizing its facilities, stretch from Iowa to North Carolina.
All right, thanks, Betsy. South Korea has been a major buyer of U.S. pork. The country's trade minister gathering with lawmakers in Washington, D.C. this week ahead of a meeting with U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer. Lighthizer and Korean officials meeting next month to discuss a path forward for KORUS, the U.S.-Korea Free Trade Agreement. The administration is seeking to amend the 5-year-old deal to address the trade deficit with South Korea. The global biofuel market is expected to reach $115 billion over the next 8 years, growing about 7% annually. A new report from Grand View Research says the Asia-Pacific market will lead the way with the fastest growth. China, Australia, the Philippines, and India are all mandating that an increasing amount of biofuels are added to their national fuel policies. Now, in 2009, India required a 5% ethanol blend. By the end of this year, it's supposed to reach 20%. With a growing economy, the study shows India is likely to witness the fastest growth in terms of product demand. Speaking of the Chinese market, demand for U.S. peanuts is on the rise there. USDA projecting that China will buy roughly $100 million worth of peanuts this year. That's up big from just what it was a few years ago. China bought about $172 million worth of U.S. peanuts last year, a roughly 700% increase from what it imported in 2015. Now, peanut harvest is underway in southwest Georgia. This video from Machinery Pete and the team at Sun South, a large dealership there in Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi. USDA says currently 13% of the Georgia peanut crop is harvested. That's just a bit ahead of the 5-year average. Conditions are nearly 75% good to excellent in that state. Owners of Beef Products Incorporated announcing they're establishing a $10 million fund to benefit former BPI employees impacted by plant closures. BPI laid off roughly 750 employees and closed facilities when sales dropped, stemming from a series of reports about the company's lean, finely textured beef product broadcast by ABC News back in 2012. Now in June, BPI settled a $1.9 billion lawsuit against ABC and correspondent Jim Avila for defamation and claims that the network had used false information. Let's check conditions elsewhere across the country with our own meteorologist Mike Hoffman. Today's crop comments. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning, Clinton. We'll begin in Montana, which has received some badly needed moisture the past few weeks. Topsoil and subsoil conditions have improved because of it. This week, 68% of subsoil and 61% of topsoil is called short to very short. But 2 weeks ago, both categories were in the mid to upper 90s. That additional moisture is needed for winter wheat planting. Many producers had parked their seeders to see if conditions would improve. Right now, winter wheat planting is 20 points behind average in Montana. In Talladega County, Alabama, a NASS crop reporter says the first soybeans of the season are now being harvested, and cotton growers are defoliating that crop. Statewide, about 3% has been picked, which is right on the 5-year average according to NASS data. And take a look at the drought monitor. You can see there are some dry areas continuing to get a little worse through the middle of the country, but like we said, a little bit better in Montana and the Dakotas. We'll talk more about that and have your forecast. But first, here are some hometown temps.
Ever wake up wondering what does today's weather have in store? Well, with weather updates, it delivers the local forecast right to your cell phone each morning to make preparing for the day easier. Just text Weather 6 to 31313 to get started.
When we come back, we'll look at the soybean market and discuss what price levels traders are watching. And later, Ken Ferry shares his thoughts on the challenges of managing nitrogen in a year like 2017.
Ag Day, brought to you by the Enlist Weed Control System. More weed control, less drift and volatility, maximum yield potential.
In agribusiness, commodities not feeling the love in early trade Thursday. Let's see how things are setting up for Friday on the floor of the CME.
I want to start looking at corn. December corn contract is going to be the month of interest. That is going to be new crop as we start to continue through harvest season here throughout the Corn Belt. We've been narrowing in a little bit of a range, basically 362 at the top of that range and 344 on the bottom. We've been making higher lows and lower highs. I'm looking for either a breakout or a breakdown. If you view out the chart on a longer term perspective, you can see the bears still do have control. And I think if we do get a bearish number and continue to see better than expected harvest results, we could see more pressure in this market. As far as soybeans are concerned, they're a little bit different. They've been a little bit more constructive over the past month, marking a pretty sturdy bottom. We've been seeing higher highs and higher lows, which is very constructive. We're trading off a little bit today, but we want to see 960 hold on a closing basis. This is going to be for the November contract. If we're able to hold that to round out the week, which happens to be the end of the quarter as well, I think we could see continued interest and press us towards 987. China's been a big buyer over the past couple weeks, and I expect to see them continue to step in with pretty good demand. Cattle complex feeling a little bit friendly over the past couple sessions. This after we gap lower after a big number in placements on that cattle on feed report last Friday. We gap lower, saw that pressure. Now we're seeing some covering off a pretty decent demand. Cash tends to be a little bit steady here. Now, October live cattle is still trading, but you're going to see twice as much volume in December. So that is the month of interest for us. So that's what we're looking at. That's what you should be looking at too.
Brian Splitt with Allendale Incorporated, our guest today. Brian, let's talk about this soybean market, because even though we're in harvest, we saw a little bit of a lift to end last week. And that's good, right? How do these levels compare?
Well, that's great. We have seen some of these rallies take place where you make some lows in August and then you find some buying. And I think that typically means that you price in some of the worst of the news, and then the market, once it gets that out of the way, gets a little bit more positive. But this week we've interacted with some really major levels on the charts. If you're a technician, you should be really well aware of the 980 level basis, the November bean contract. We had made some lows to begin the year in January at 981 and a quarter. And that kind of set the stage. Going into the March planning intentions, we took out 980 and the 200-day moving average, eventually went down towards 940, came back up to 980 on the May report, failed at the 200-day, went down, made the June lows, jumped over the 980 level up from July 3rd to July 5th, went up, made the summer high, came down, hit 984, 984 and a half twice, broke down below that right at the beginning of August. Now here we are breaking out above 980. So right now, if you're a technician, you're probably taking some measurements on the charts thinking that this thing could potentially get up towards 1020.
Well, that would be good news, especially at a time of year when you're going out to the combine, you're harvesting and trying to, have some good information, some good news to make you get that job done, right?
Well, that's right. And so some of the things you have to be aware of right now is that we do have a tremendous amount of carry in the market. So November beans out to July beans trading around that 34 to 35 cent area. So it's paying you to store beans right now. And we have not been accustomed to that. We've seen inverted bean markets over the last several years where November might be over January or over March. So if you have the capability to store beans and we see 1020 November, if you can lock in the carry at 35 cents, and if we see 1020 get out of the long November position, that's going to leave you short July at 1055 if you lock that carry in, and that's a nice place to be, to store beans for over 1050 a bushel.
Yeah, puts you in a pretty good mood, I would assume.
I would think so, yeah.
All right, Brian, thanks for being here. We'll be back with more AgDay in just a minute.
To talk to Brian Splitt one-on-one, call Allendale Incorporated at 800-551-4626 or email him at bsplit@allendale-inc.com. AgDay, brought to you by Alivo Seed Treatment from Bayer. Protect your soybeans from SDS and nematodes this season. AgDay weather, brought to you by Kawasaki and the new Mule Pro FXR side-by-side. Ride like a boss with high-end styling and rugged capability.
Welcome back to AgDay. Meteorologist Mike Hoffman. Mike, as we look at the drought monitor here, we can see a bigger area, maybe more area covered, but intensity seems to be going down in some cases.
Yeah, I think that's true, especially the northern plains, parts of the Illinois area. But all in all, like you said, there's a lot more color on this map, you could say. Like the tan area that you can see in a lot of the map there, but that's dry, but not quite in a drought yet. Obviously, those areas we need to get some moisture, keep that from happening. You go back 4 weeks, though, and you can see the areas were a lot smaller, but a little more intense across parts of the central plains into the northern plains and much of Montana. Going through the past 3 weeks, you can just see how that tan area especially has continued to expand across the eastern parts of the country and even out west in some cases as well. Here's the way the maps look as we start the day today. We actually have an area of low pressure that we have to watch. Once it gets east of Florida, it's possible that could become some type of a tropical system. You'll see that coming up. In the meantime, the cool front, the first one, is going to continue to move offshore. Not much moisture with that. Storm system out west in the eastern portions of the Rockies is going to move northward, pulling some of that Gulf moisture up through Texas and into the western plains and the eastern portions of the Rocky Mountain states. And you can see this little system diving through the Great Lakes into the northeast with some scattered showers along it as well. Another batch of very dry, cool air coming into the Great Lakes as we head into tomorrow morning and start the weekend. You can see a system out west spreading some showers across the northern plains, northern Rockies, as we head through the day tomorrow. Take a look at precipitation estimates over the past 24 hours. Heaviest amounts have been in southern half of Texas. Adding in the next 36 hours, we're going to add a fair amount in southern and southeastern Florida with that system kind of grazing the southern portions of the state. And we're going to add some more into eastern areas of the Four Corner region on up into Colorado as we head through the next 36 hours. Snowfall almost took this map out, but we'll keep showing it to you. Not a lot, but a few of the highest elevations in Colorado has seen a little bit over the past 24 hours. Looking at temperatures, highs only in the 50s and 60s. Great Lakes into the northeast. The muggy stuff has been pressed all the way to the Gulf Coast. Lows tonight going to drop into the 60s in many parts of the southeast except for Gulf Coast areas, and 30s and 40s Great Lakes in the northeast. And we keep it on the cool side. Very pleasant conditions across most of the Corn Belt. The muggy stuff, again, way to the south, all because of this trough moving through. You can see how the ridge comes in, and now it's expected to hold much of next week for the central and eastern Corn Belt before the next trough starts to move eastward. That's a look across the country. Now let's take a look at some local forecasts. First of all, Denver, Colorado, mostly cloudy and rather cool, high temperature of 65 degrees. St. Louis, Missouri, lots of sunshine, very pleasant, high around 80. And Jacksonville, Florida, partly sunny, warm and humid with an afternoon high of 91.
Well, up next, running out of nitrogen can be a costly mistake, but getting it to plants in a timely manner isn't always easy. Ken Ferry explains on Farm Journal College TV next, and later, my thoughts on community and being a good neighbor.
AgDay, brought to you by John Deere. Where can you find the most comprehensive inventory of John Deere certified pre-owned tractors, combines, and sprayers? MachineFinder.com. Sometimes the best new addition to your fleet isn't new. Farm Journal College TV is brought to you by Instinct and N-Serve. Maximize every nitrogen application so your crops deliver the max in return. Learn more at maxinmaxout.com.
Nutrient management is costly, especially if weather makes it hard to fully utilize things like nitrogen. Well, today on Farm Journal College TV, Ken Ferry not only talks nitrogen management, he discusses how it impacts yields at harvest.
So with the wet weather we had in a lot of areas early in the season, it produced yellow corn because it moved nutrients deeper than the corn roots were. We could tell it when we pulled nitrates. The second foot was twice as high as the top foot. So that puts you in a situation where you're going to have yellow corn until you catch up to it. So yellow corn then did turn back green when the roots caught up to it, and it maybe finished strong, but that yellow in the front could have caused kernel set problems, things like that. The corn that started turning yellow 4 weeks ago, from nitrogen deficiency, that's the most expensive because that nails you with depth of kernel. So some of our varieties make a lot of their yield punch with depth of kernel, which is made, depth of kernel is made the last 30 days of the last 60 days. And if you run out of nitrogen coming into that and you have a hybrid that has a lot of depth in kernel, you just choked it. It can't produce. So a scenario where in the wet areas we saw quite a bit of that, just not enough nitrogen to deal with the amount of rain that they got. In the dry areas, if you are nitrogen deficient, when the drought really kicked in, the corn comes apart pretty fast. You just don't want to be nitrogen deficient going into a drought. You just can't take it. The corn will come apart pretty fast.
When we come back, stepping away from your screen and in front of your neighbor.
In the Country, sponsored by Kubota. Discover the power behind the M6 series at Kubota.com or visit your local Kubota dealer today.
As the nation prepares for another weekend of football and sports, this week has seen endless banter and sharp jabs from and about sports stars, the national anthem, and the meaning behind these protests and anti-protest protests. Well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to get into that. Personally, I think everybody already has their mind made up about their opinion and why they support it. My ranting isn't going to change your mind, just like I'm pretty sure no clever memes on Facebook or Twitter have changed any minds there either. What I am going to suggest, if you really want change on either side, why don't you make a commitment to your community? Big or small, get involved, meet people, spend time with them, get to know their stories, what makes them tick and what you have in common. It's so easy to sit behind our screens and shout our deepest felt feelings into the webosphere, but trolling other commenters on social media won't help you build a bridge with your neighbor, and that's something we're doing a lot less of these days. Did you know right now Americans are less likely to spend social evenings with their neighbors? That's according to a general social survey. Back in 1974, 61% of Americans said they would spend a social evening with someone in their neighborhood at least once a month, while 39% said they would do so less than once a month or not at all. Well, today, fewer than half, 46% say they'll spend a social evening with their neighbors at least monthly, compared to 54% who do not. We're living closer than ever, and yet the nation is drifting apart. Find a reason. Be the awkward person that brings a cake, a pie, a pizza, or gets to know the people around you. There are so many neighbors that would welcome a friendly hand. People are dealing with fires, with floods, with hurricanes, and floundering finances. Selfless acts between neighbors is when America demonstrates its true character. America is supposed to be a melting pot, but today it feels more like a stew. We'll stop stewing After Ag Day is over, why don't you step outside, take a stand, make a commitment to help your community be a better place. You won't always see eye to eye, but at least you'll be sharing common ground. That's all the time we have this morning. We're sure glad you started your day with us. From all of us here at Ag Day, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Have a great day.